Hello, everyone. I wanted to turn around and put together a lecture to talk about the different stages of language development. And as you look through your ebook, this can be quite extensive. All the content is obviously important, but I'm going to try and break it down a little bit to get to those facets that I think are the best without giving you a lecture that runs on for about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to add a few things. I'm going to basically edit a few things, and a lot of the material you're going to see right out of the book, but I put it together into a lecture here. So let's get started. When we talk about the different stages in language development, everything begins with what is referred to as the prelinguistic speech stage. By pre-linguistic speech, what we simply mean is that this is pre-language. We're not talking vocalized words, organized language as of yet. So what are we referring to? One of the very first types of communication, as you see there, that we see in infants is crying. A lot of times this is followed by cooing and babbling. We tend to put those together into the same thing. So I only have cooing there, but I would say cooing slash babbling tends to follow crying. And then we get into some aspects that I think deserve a little bit more attention, and that is what is called accidental and deliberate imitation. So these are just the general categories of this prelinguistic speech stage. Let's go ahead and get into each one of these four in a little bit more detail. First of all, we talk about crying. Now, quite honestly, crying is the very first form of communication that infants possess, that they have. It's all about that. That's the only way they can communicate as newborns. Either they'll just stare at you or they'll cry. I mean, when they're newborns, they're not cooing, they're not babbling, they're not saying words just yet. It's going to take a while. So, why do infants cry? Well, the fact of the matter is, it sounds pretty obvious. Crying tends to denote a negative state. They don't cry because they're happy. They don't turn around and cry because they're in a good mood or they're curious. They cry because something is wrong. So that leads us to understand, so why do they cry? And do they have different cries? Anyone who has been a parent or a babysitter, if you ask them the question, do infants cry differently to mean different things? And a lot of people would say yes, and they're right, they do. This here is a picture of what is called an oscilloscope. And science has used this device in studying language and in studying crying to watch the changes, the peaks and the valleys of the voice of, in this case, of an infant when they cry. And they've actually found that infants cry differently for different things. There's different peaks, there's different valleys, the inflections are not the same. I'm not going to mimic them here, but you need to realize that they do. So what are some of the different cries? They cry a certain way if they are hungry, all right? Uh, they cry differently than if they are in pain. A lot of times a painful cry, especially if it catches them off guard, is short for a moment until they take that deep breath and then they sort of let go with their fear, with their pain, excuse me. And you know, when they take that deep breath, you're just waiting for it because it's coming. They cry differently when they're scared or frightened. They cry differently if they're frustrated, all right, or fatigued. Frustration, they need a diaper change. They're soiled, they don't like it, or they're fatigued, or that maybe just other babies are crying. One of the things that I have noticed and science has noticed is that if you bring a baby into a room and other babies are crying, sometimes they'll start crying too. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's just someone else is unhappy, so they're unhappy. Try being a daycare worker. God bless those wonderful people that you suddenly have one child start to cry and you have a whole room of babies that start to cry. The next thing that happens typically around 6 to 12 weeks of age is that babies will take it to the next level and they will begin to coo and babble. Okay? Cooing and babbling, as you see there, can start somewhere between a month and a half and 3 months of age, 6 to 12 weeks of age. If you tell that to a parent, 6 to 12 weeks, the vast majority of parents will expect their child to start cooing and babbling at 6 weeks and 1 day. And I guarantee you there is a window of 6 weeks there that it can start. And not all children begin cooing and babbling at the same time. So if your neighbor's child, if your sister's child, your brother's child starts cooing and babbling at basically 6 or 7 weeks, and your child is 10 or 11 weeks along and still hasn't made a sound other than to cry, it's normal. It's not worth running off to see the pediatrician just yet and say something's wrong, because a lot of times they'll tell you you're still within that window. So it's not worth panicking over. Why do babies coo and why do babies babble? Okay. Well, cooing and babbling, unlike crying, they denote a positive emotion. All right, a positive state. Infants do not coo and babble when they're tired and angry or frustrated and things like that. That's left to crying. All right, this tends to evoke, all right, a positive feeling, or a feeling of wonderment, of interest, of fascination. That's why they coo, followed by babbling. All right. It is worth noting that there seems to be something of an understanding of words others speak starts to appear. And what I mean by that is this. When it comes to cooing and babbling, if you listen to parents talk and you pay particular attention to the inflections in the voice of a mother or even a father or a babysitter as they try to interact and talk with a baby, you start to, if you really pay attention, you'll start to notice that sometimes the cooing and the babbling, the inflections in their voice will mimic the inflections of the parent or the adult, let's say. All right? So I say that again. You will start to see if the voice inflections within a parent, hello, all right, the drop and then the peak and so on, you can hear that change in tone, da da, as it happens within a baby. All right, so they really start to mimic that. Now, when it comes to this mimicking, we speak of what are called word babies. Word babies seem to understand words earlier and put them into their babbling. Now, they don't understand the word itself and what it means, but you will notice that they pay attention to the tone. And so if you speak a long sentence and pay close attention, sometimes they'll pick up on the first word or the last word in your sentence. If you say, hello, how are you? You might hear them either mimic the first word, hello, da da, or you will turn around and hear them mimic the last word. You say, how are you? And if you're talking in parentese, where you're stretching it out and being more deliberate, you might hear them mimic that very last word, okay, as their tone trails off, as yours does as you say a sentence. They can focus on their babbling and add in words that they hear from you. There's also what is called intonation babies. Intonation babies are babies that sound, their babbling sounds like sentences, all right? There's no specific words present, but they're mimicking you. They're mimicking you. They're mimicking your sentence. So if you say, hello, how are you? And you listen to their babbling, if it goes da da, da da da, that is what we would refer to as an intonation baby. And basically, the idea is that they don't understand the sentence per se, but they can mimic the tone, the whole intonation that you put forth. Some babies can only mimic certain words, some babies can mimic entire sentences in a sense, an intonation. There have been a few studies looking at intonation babies versus word babies in terms of later intelligence. Are babies who can mimic entire sentences and intonation more intelligent than babies that mimic a single word? There have been research studies done, and I will say this. The studies find that yes, there is a correlation between intelligence and the extent to which their language is. But I have to point out to you that correlational study is weak. And it's worth noting that it's there, but it's not a strong study. So if you have a baby that seems to be more of a word baby, do not worry, do not panic. It doesn't mean that your child will not be as intelligent as other children. There is a study there, and there is evidence, but the evidence isn't very strong. In terms of cooing and babbling, we mentioned before the concept of accidental and deliberate imitation. Accidental imitation, these people tend to believe that imitation of either a word or an entire sentence, an intonation, is done strictly by chance. Okay, we reinforce it because we hear it and we think it's something we like because we as parents pick up on what they're doing, and that gets the language going. There are those that believe that this imitation by infants, all right, is more deliberate. Okay, and they observe, they pay attention. And because of that, they turn around and then mimic what they hear, and we reinforce that. Back to the earlier lecture on theories of language development. Which learning theorist would be more apt to believe in accidental imitation? And which learning theorist is more apt to believe in deliberate imitation? Okay? Give that some thought. It may show up as a test question or a quiz question. All right. Beyond that, folks, we turn around and we get into the next phase, which is called linguistic speech. Uh, Linguistic speech is obviously language-based speech. There is no longer, sounds and utterances. There's actual vocalized words. And most linguistic speech tends to start around age 10 to 14. All right? There's something of a range there. If one child says their first word around 10 and a half weeks, or 10 and a half months, excuse me, and another child may not say their first word till about 14 months. The typical time is around 12 months of age, 1 year old. All right. The first words that are typically spoken by infants are what we refer to as hollow phrases. A hollow phrase is a one-word sentence, okay? A single word that denotes an entire meaning, all right? And you can have the same word mean different things, such as a child may turn around and say the word milk, and what they're doing is they're pointing to the milk bottle, their baby bottle up on the counter, and they say milk, and it infers, I'm thirsty, I want my milk. You could turn around and have the same child just holding on to the bottle after taking a big long drink, and they may say the word milk, which is just their way of inferring that's what I've got in my hands. They're not asking for it, they've got it. So it can mean a lot of different things. There are different types of hollow phrases, all right? And they can mean a great many things, all right? For the most part, there are names of things, such as dog or cat. That would be an example of a hollow phrase, a one word. There could be specific names, and a lot of kids like one-syllable names, such as John or Anne. They will learn two-syllable and three-syllable names eventually, but the shorter ones are the better ones. They will learn action hollow phrases, such as go and stop, or ones that denote feelings. Probably the one that denotes more feelings than anything else is the word no. And they learn it. It's called negativism. They learn that one pretty early. No, 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 that kind of stuff. So that does happen in that regard. All right. So those are sort of the four categories of hollow phrases that we see. From 15 to 18 months of age, science will tell us that they tend to know approximately 10 words or 10 hollow phrases. All right. That they develop in and during that time. From 18 to 24 months of age, their vocabulary sort of skyrockets, okay, as they go from, say, 50 words around 18 months of age to as many as 400 words during this time. And it leads us to wonder what causes such this large jump in vocabulary from 10 words at 15 months to as many as 400 words by 2 years of age. And really the answer is that during this time, this 18 to 20 year and a half to 2 year age, is when they tend to say their first sentence. This is what we call telegraphic speech. They are now combining words. Instead of just saying go, they may turn around and say we go. It's still pretty simplified, but it really is a step in the right direction. And I call it telegraphic. I think it's also referred to as a telephrase. So they get better and better at this as their mental maturation sort of exhibits, and that tends to go pretty good. Around 20 to 30 months of age, so there's a little overlap there, we see an increase in the use of what is called syntax. They've gone from one-word phrases, hollow phrases, to two-word sentences, and sometimes they start getting a little bit more in there, telephrases. We start to see children using during this time things such as articles, using the, or using the word a, okay, the ball or a ball, all right, or the store, instead of saying the word store or saying the word go, maybe they said go store, and now they say, basically the store, all right. They also begin to use during this time prepositions such as in, okay, or on, or under, or over, and things of that sort. And finally, we see them using pronouns. Okay, pronouns are probably one of the toughest things that they have to learn because they begin to realize that someone who has a name, my name is John, so they say John. John could also be a he. John could also be him. All right. If they learn a word such as Ann, A-N-N, the name Ann, they learn that, Anne can also be a she or her. So pronouns can be quite a challenge as they try to figure that out. And then you group people together, you use the word they or them. So there's a lot of mistakes. And if they make mistakes, it's no big deal. We simply correct it and we help them along. All right. You can really see the progression from being able to do nothing more than cry to by 30 months of age, which is 2.5 years, able to speak upwards of 400 words or more by this point, using articles, pronouns, and prepositions. Finally, in terms of vocabulary, by ages 4 to 5, which is 48 to 60 months of age, we see a lot of continued development of syntax. All right, the development of things such as more pronouns. They learn more words, articles a and the, and so on and so forth. Contractions or but get used, and so on. During this time, the average sentence is probably about 4 to 5 words in length. And they're getting better and better at this, all right? A lot of times through practice. By age 6 to 7, now we're talking school, all right? By 6 to 7, they are in school and sentences are becoming increasingly complex. They can turn around and really start to form together a lot of words, and their grammar tends to get a lot better during this time. So their vocabulary is growing, their use of words, they're even beginning to learn to use during age 6 and 7. I don't have it up here. Aspects such as the tense of verbs, okay, past, present, and future. They're even learning those as well. So from 7 years earlier being able to do nothing more than cry to by this age, second grade, a lot of times first, second grade, they're able to do amazing things, speak in complex sentences, respond to others' comments. They do a really good job. All right, folks, that's it for that one. That's a pretty long one. Hope that helps.